Hey all, Michael Black Snow Comics here. Let's talk Punisher Season 1. So I've been watching all the Netflix Marvel shows in chronological order, and the last one was Defenders, so now we're at Punisher Season 1. Previously, I saw Punisher appear in Daredevil Season 2. He was a pretty prominent character. He hasn't really been seen since then. He's supposed to be dead, even though we knew he wasn't dead, and that's where the show picks up, is where the world still thinks he's dead. As far as the Netflix shows, I gotta say, so far this has been my one that I've enjoyed the least. I just wasn't as into it as any of the other shows. This take on the Punisher, I find it's interesting, but it's also a little problematic for me. It was the same thing with his depiction in Daredevil, but he wasn't the main focus there. Here, of course, he's the star, so it's all about him, and all the supporting things are all built around him. It's very, very militaristic. It goes very heavily into his military background, and pretty much all his supporting casts are ex-military people. And that just plays a pretty prominent role that I don't find that interesting. There is one character that is coping with PTSD from being in the military, that we get to see how he has a really hard time coming back to society and how that kind of turns him into a villain. And that part I thought was kind of interesting. But that's not a huge focus of the season. He's kind of a minor villain. But that was one of the more interesting parts I enjoyed. It doesn't really have much connection to any of the other shows, which was a little bit of a bummer after seeing Defenders and how everything came together so nicely. There's very few characters or elements from the other shows coming into this one. The only really recurring character from another series was Karen Page, and she had kind of developed a relationship with Frank Castle in Daredevil Season 2, so that made sense. Although I will say, this is when usually I like Karen and all the other things I've seen her, and I liked her in The Defenders quite a bit, but I really started to not like her as much this time around, because she just had this kind of blind loyalty to the Punisher, where she was defending him constantly, and there's a lot of talk about if he's a terrorist and if he's doing the wrong thing or the right thing. And she was always just on the side of blindly saying that. Like, she goes out of her way to say what a great guy he is multiple times. And he is not a great guy. He's a terrible guy. That was kind of my biggest problem with the show, is Frank Castle is just awful. He has very few redeeming qualities. He is, at his best, he's kind of a dickhead and a bully, and at his worst, he's a psychotic killer. And that's pretty much all there is to him. He's just this violent, kind of evil guy. I mean, he has a lot of darkness that is what kind of makes the character cool in a way, but here it's just amplified to the nth degree, and it makes this whole series kind of unpleasant to watch. There's so much violence and torture and just kind of angsty darkness that it's overwhelming. And I mean, I don't mind violence. I like it in other things. It's just the way it's played here. I don't care for it. In the past, I liked the Punisher movies because those had kind of a campy element to them. So the violence was very over the top, and well, there was a lot of it. It wasn't explicitly gory and like something that felt so relatable. Here, this is kind of set in the grounded world that Daredevil had set up, and it's played in a much more realistic way, where it's just people being shot and tortured and treated poorly generally. Most of the characters are pretty unlikable on this show. There's very few. There's pretty much I can think of two characters that I really liked that seemed like good people. And one of them being Micro, and the other one being Punisher's friend who runs a support group. And that was about it. Everyone else is pretty awful, and even Micro's not that great. I don't know, the whole arc of the season was kind of odd too. Like the other Netflix shows, there's a lot of stalling and dragging to fill these 13 episodes. The narrative structure is just kind of bizarre. Mostly it involves uncovering a conspiracy that's related to the death of his family and the things he did when he served his time in the military, which I didn't find all that interesting. There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff with Homeland Security and with the private security firm and different things, and honestly I didn't find any of that like too thrilling, and that's the main focus of the show, and those are the main villains are just like ex-soldiers type people that he served with, which I don't know. It definitely didn't feel like very superhero-y, less so than probably any of the Marvel shows I've watched so far on Netflix. So yeah, I had my issues with this one, and I had tried watching it in the past, but I only got like an episode and a half in just because I didn't really like it. And if I wasn't watching it with a purpose of watching all of these, I might not have watched it now, just because it wasn't something where it was really clicking with me. I was just not that into it. And I mean, people probably, if you're a fan of the Punisher, maybe this is more what you're into, because he is known for kind of his darkness and violence and seeking vengeance and stuff. I mean, that's all in line, but I don't know, I just didn't care for the way it's done here, where he's just this jarhead that everything's based on kind of his military past coming up over and over and over again. And I can't say that I loved the actor playing the Punisher either. I don't know, I've heard some people say he was perfect for the role. I don't know. I just think of him as Shane from The Walking Dead, where he was kind of a similar character, and I don't feel like he captured the Punisher well to me. Mostly all he is grunts and growls and stuff. One of the reasons I liked Micro was because he would point out these kind of things, and he was the only one that added like any levity, but he would point out kind of the overtop ridiculousness to the Punisher. So I thought he was a pretty good thing. Another issue I had with the character, and this is brought up in Daredevil Season 2, and it's kind of used in his trial, but it's explicitly depicted here that the Punisher has a mental illness, basically. Something's happened to him so that he always remembers the moment of his family's death and relives it. So every time he's asleep, he's waking up to them dying again. So constantly that's happening over and over for him, which is an interesting idea, and you could see how that makes him filled with so much rage and fuels all this fury he has. But it's also kind of an uncomfortable motivation for me, at least, as the audience, where we're seeing mental illness play such a prominent role in guiding his actions, and it's not something he's seeking any help for or anything. This is something that he uses to fuel himself, and I didn't really like that aspect at all either. So overall, I don't know, let's put a number on it. I guess let's give it a 4 out of 10. I mean, I could see why people would enjoy it. It wasn't for me. Maybe season 2 will be better. I guess we'll see when we get to that. I think the next thing I'm watching is Jessica Jones Season 2. So we'll see where that takes us. And until next time,